wireless, connected health space, including wellness and fitness, chronic disease care, remote diagnosis and monitoring, healing and aging in place, health informatics, and I'm sure a lot more as the industry grows. Let's welcome Jack. Change this for you. Okay, there you go. Sorry.
Thanks, Gil. Thank you. All right. How's everybody? So I bet you everybody's glucose level is probably pretty low now before lunchtime. So fortunately, we have an Ega matrix if anybody wants to take a reading. I'm sure every time you open up a newspaper or listen to the TV that a company get exit, $1 billion Facebook worth $100 billion at least one point, you wonder, what should we do? How do you get there, right? So I'm sure lots of people starting to pull out a piece of paper and napkin, come out jogging down some ideas and call their buddies and say, hey, let's build a startup company. Well, that's good. The idea is great. Every company starting with a great idea. So the next thing you have to think about is, well, if it's an idea, what are the intellectual properties behind it? What can I develop? And then who besides my drinking buddies and tennis partners, who else can I call on to build a company, right? Because to build a company, you need people to build the products, marketing, and the company run the company. And lastly, when you get ready to think about a company, essentially how big that company can be, right? If you want to get rich, you want to sell a company for $1 billion. If the only products you can sell is to your friends and neighbors, you're not going to go too far. So obviously, next thing coming down is what we talk about funding. How do we get funding, right? So if you look at the chart here, this is nice and clean from stage to stages, but this only exists in the textbook. This is actually, we talked about today, in today's environment, it's the clutter, right? So just about every form of financing is available. So you're starting with, obviously, the first thing is look at your bank account and talk to your spouse and how much money you get to spare, and think about can you afford to quit a job? And next thing we heard over and over again is maximize whatever the resources you have, your 401ks and credit cards. And hopefully you can get into a stage that you can convince your friends to chip in, your uncles, wealthy uncles, whatnot, and then so on and so forth. And luckily today there are so many sources of fundings available, even ever creative. You heard about things called crowdfunding, that you can actually submit an idea to the internet. Not everybody can chip in a couple $100 and a couple $1,000 and to help you to get started. And then once you build the company to certain stages, then obviously the institution comes in, the corporate investors, the financial investors, and finally, hopefully, that one day you can make it to the IPO, and then from there. So what I think about the funding is, imagine yourself as a CEO. Obviously, your number one job is to build products. Unfortunately, the other number one job is raising funding, right? So it's a continuous job. If you're the CEO, the number one thing that constantly in your mind is, how do I keep the company afloat? How do I get my plane continue fueled? And one of the challenges here is that I said, it's great you got an idea, you have a passion for it, you maximize your network and your credit card, and you get the company certain. But what oftentimes we see is that's not good enough. I have over time and time the people coming to me, as you're talking to the average venture investor, you probably my colleagues in the industries, the average is about 100, 150 companies on a yearly basis. And oftentimes, having this kind of conversation, the entrepreneur come back over and over again. They exhausted everything. And then sometimes they're frustrated. What do I need to do to convince you? Well, there's no magic to it, right? Every venture has a threshold, and they have a thesis. And oftentimes, it's the biggest challenge is to from a seed stage to get into a venture capital. So unless you are an EVP of Google or Facebook, or you had a meg exit, the chances are you're not going to get any attention from a tier 1 VC or any VC in that matter. So the first thing is you're going to have to work on an idea, proving a concept before you can get anybody interested. A paper where it's not going to get you anywhere. Fortunately, today, starting the company compared to 10 years ago, it's much, much lower. So why is that? I think a number of contributors to that, one of which is the open source software, right? Today, instead of license, you get a license. There's tons of open source software you can tap into that. At least beginning building your products, you can rely on that. And secondly, you have all this cloud computing, shared computing powers. Instead of hiring your ITs and buy a rack of expensive computers, you can start as little as monthly lease on Amazon and to get the computer started. And thirdly is the outsourcing capability, right? I'm talking to companies out there, they have 3 people that have millions in dollars. How do they do that? Obviously, 3 people cannot do that. But fortunately, you can outsource to your design to many other low-cost areas. And then the other thing, especially in the mobile space, is standardization. At least on the iOS space, there is a lot of, so you can focus on one OS, and with limited QA, you can get started with your company and launch that to the market. So the challenge here is that, how do you get to, your seed to a venture funding? So the key here is you got to be prepared, right? So one of the biggest hard thing is that, okay, sorry. How do you get to people's attention? I think one of the first thing is you got to get your message clear, right? Some entrepreneurs come in and, one, they try to be overly secretive. They're afraid that the minute they're giving the idea away, somebody's going to steal from that. And the chances are, as I mentioned earlier, the venture capital are just flooded with ideas, hundreds and over the years. So nobody's really going to take your ideas. If you have an idea, chances are he has heard it before, and chances are he's going to give you some ideas to improve your idea. Maybe something you haven't looked at it, maybe areas that you should look into that. The second thing is networking and networking. The key is, if you were to be using any resources, whether lawyers, accountants, right? So making sure you choose somebody actually working in the environment before, have dealing with the ventures, the founder, the investors before, instead of choosing somebody just have your brother-in-law that worked in the Fortune 500 companies. The other thing is every firm, have their specialties, and oftentimes the firm at any given time they have a portfolio and they have an investment thesis. So make sure to do your research. Just don't pick up the phone and just do. Or try to cold call somebody. Do your research, figure out what is the sweet spot for that firm, and then find the right partner and find the optimal time to get introduced and to make your time count and make their time worthwhile for you. And don't shop around too much, right, unless you're ready for it. So make sure that you're working with you and your advisors to come up with a very concise list of the people that you want to talk to, the list of firms, the specific people you want to talk to, and make sure that you get introduced, a warm introduction to that. And don't really set any expectations. Make sure that you get the feedbacks, starting with a small, maybe 3, 5, and iterate, and before move on to plaster everybody. It is probably not desirable that if you talk to every single firms in Sand Hill Road and everybody turns you down, the things gets around. So it's ideally that you choose a few and test it before you go into just about plastering everybody. So the first stage is obviously, as I said, shortly after you exhaust your personal fortune here, that is to go seeking the angels. Fortunately, we are fortunate in the U.S., especially in the coastals. We have lots of millionaires. In fact, even the economic downturn, we still have 4.2 million millionaires in this country, and many of them are making investment. In fact, stats says about a 250,000 people in this country are very active in angel investment, meaning they're making one investor a year. And more angels form networks so they can share diligence, get more confident to make investment. The angel investors are very, very much active and found key to the success of early stage companies. If you look at this chart alone, this is the stats of 2009 that roughly about $24 billion of venture capital in roughly less than 3,000 deals. But if you look at it, the angel investors are a lot more active. They contributed $17 billion, which is a significant number compared to all you hear the venture monies. But if you look at the deals, which is almost 20 times more than what the ventures get into. So angel is definitely the place to to get your initial fundings. And I mentioned earlier, more and more angels. There's 250,000 people out there. There's a lot more reachable. Many are in your local area. So let's just take a look at a conventional angel. What does a conventional angel look like? In fact, many of you in the room fits exactly the profile. Many of you are successful entrepreneurs. You have accumulated your wealth and experience, and you're qualified to make investments. So most people thinking you have to be a millionaire to be angel investor. That's not necessarily always the only criteria. In fact, according to the SEC definition, that any person, natural person, with income exceeding $200,000 in each last 2 years has a reasonable potential to maintain that income can make investments, right? So you don't have to be a millionaire to make that angel investment. If you have a couple, that number only goes to $300,000. So as long as I think most of the corporate executives qualify for that. So as long as you clear that, and you'll see more and more people are definitely qualified for that. So make sure that you network and reach out to people and seeking investments. And more angels, in fact, are grouping together, form these angel groups, and probably you've seen that one of the most successful is the PayPal mafias. They banded together. These are what we call the super angels. It was a tremendous personal wealth and experience, and they banding together. But more so, just about every city there is some kind of angel group. So there you have a wider access to not individual angels, but to a group of people. And then there is another thing I want to point out. There is a matching list, which is called Angel List. So for those of you not familiar, just about in a Silicon Valley, it's almost like a Facebook, LinkedIn type of network. Anybody can submit an idea, and any people registered in the Angel List can view your ideas and perhaps reach out to you. And the other thing I want to point out is just today, just about every venture, whether it's corporate or the large ventures, has what they call the seed program. So the seed program is quite different from the traditional venture investment. Their criteria is probably quite a bit significantly lower entry level compared to if you were to be going for a Series A or B. So do ask these companies, do they have a seed program? If they do, ask what is the criteria and who's in charge of that. So these is, again, a professional resources to reach to that, and the chances are that somebody, the professional ventures make a seed investment in you, they have a vested interest in you, and the chances are that you can gradually, more smoothly, towards their Series A and Series B funding in the future. The other resources is that we see more and more companies, organizations are formed, so-called the incubators. The incubators are a lot more comprehensive. Not only they provide you the capital, but oftentimes a shared workspace. We've seen lots of incubators. Rock Health, for example, I think many of you are here familiar with that in San Francisco, is that they have a shared workplace and a very well-designed programs that typically last 3 to 6 months. As a result, you have a chance to work with very like-minded people in a very, very exciting environment, and you have access to many mentors and many other things. For example, I've seen one of the incubators actually tally out all the benefits together. It's a lot more than the $20,000, $30,000 they will actually fund you. But other things, if you add all the legal advice, accountings, discount from using the office, et cetera, it could add easily to $100,000 or $200,000. So that's definitely worthwhile if you get it in. And even more so is that these incubators give you a great access to fundings. Lots of corporate or the venture capitalists are circling around these areas perhaps to have funding some companies. And even so, there are, for example, Y Combinators. If you get selected to the incubator, you automatically get $150,000 from some pre-arranged partners. So do approach these incubators. Do understand what their criteria is and what do you give up to. But I think in most cases that, especially for the first-time entrepreneurs, this is really worth a while to get yourself familiar with the environment, to network with people, and then get yourself prepared and network to approach to the ventures. So, venture capital. I think this is, everybody will understand. Venture capital is about to make the big exits, right? The venture partners makes money. Sorry. By picking the big winner, the Facebook, the Instagrams are making the companies, making the partnership works. Because in most cases, you know that a typical rule of thumb is that out of the 6 companies, half the company probably won't return the capital, and then 2 probably return the capital. 1 is going to return the 10, 20 times that carry the firm. So when you go, if you're ready for venture capital, one of the key things I mentioned earlier is make sure that you are ready and you have proven there is a big enough market, typically in billions, the addressable market before you approach the ventures. The thing with the venture and the investment is, if you look at the stats here, which I show, that the chances of if you ever make it to the exit, which is a long, long way, typically 6 to 7 years in the average, and $50 to $60 million capitals. And if you can see the stats here, that typically the exit routes through an IPO is very, very small. So you're less than 20, easily less than 20%. One of the 6 company actually, if you ever succeeded to a meaningful exit, is through IPO. Majority of the companies actually through M&A. And this is a national average on all startup company, but unfortunately in the digital health, because all the regulatory, all the things, I always advise to startups have a mindset, consider adding another 2 or 3 years to these national average number. So the key point leading here is make sure you choose the right person you want to work with, right? You're going to be working with these investors, whether you like it or not, for the next 5 to 6 years or even longer. So the key is make sure you choose the right people, that the VCs have the right connection, the right track record. The other thing you want to make sure is that the VCs that has the time for you, because sometimes, depends on the size of the ventures. Obviously, the downturn of a venture investment, most of the firms are downshifting, so lots of partners has left. As a result, the existing partners, unfortunately, managing many companies. So if you ask people, what is the manageable size of the board, people probably tell you a partner max out 5 to 6. But today, you see partners end up with 10, even more, these investments. So how much time can they dedicate to you, right? Fortunately, the other thing is some of the mega funds, they're starting to hire what they call operating partners. So these are the hired guns. So make sure that if you ever go into a VC, not only just the brand name, but the specific partner that will be participating with your company and participating on board, and that person can be a huge value added. So choose the firm and choose the right partner. And do ask for help, right? Because they're here to help you. Oftentimes, the crying baby gets most of the help. So I know that the people that CEO sends me emails Sunday night and Monday morning gets my attention. If I don't hear from you, assuming things are going well. So do ask for help. Ask for just everything, right? So often, especially in the early engagement, make sure you have a regular scheduled meeting. I have a good practice with some of the entrepreneurs that every other week that we synchronize. So you can ask for advice just about everything. What connection do you have? What resources you have? Making introductions, right? The VCs are here because the VCs are it can be a tremendous resource for, because they're dealing with lots of people. So make sure do ask for help. Don't be shy out there. Outside of venture capital, there's other forms of financing available, especially right after you close around the financing. I think the time is very crucial, that if you were to able to close a $5-10 million, chances are there's another form. It's quite available for you, because oftentimes what happens is things are not always as planned, right? So even if you raise $10 million and $15 million, oftentimes that 18-20 months later you find yourself actually you're not quite there to be able to raise a next round. So what's going to happen to that scenario? Chances are that inside is going to bridge you. But let's not forget that bridge is extremely, extremely expensive. Why is that? Because typical bridge is 15-20% discount. And then chances are that that bridge only going to last you 6 to 10 months, right? So what happened is you're giving up a 15-20% discount to get that bridge to get you a next round, versus if you were to convince your investors they are behind you, if you can get some form of venture debts, which I think it could be a very economical. I mean, often, even though you have to give up warrants and whatnot, but typically these rates are at the 10-12% rates versus, as I mentioned, if you were to do a bridge, you could give up a 10, 15, 20% discount in a shorter period of time. So the venture debts is another vehicle. So you have to discuss that with your investors and make sure that that is something that you can potentially tap into right after a round of fresh financing. I did mention earlier that the key is that you understand that the operating method of debts and the equity is quite different. The debt guy will follow ventures, especially you were able to get a brand name, has a track record, so this is a time to leverage. So aside from the venture finance, equity financing and venture debts, there's many other sources of financing available. Once you get the company running, you could get a revolver line of credit. Account receivable financing is quite possible, and for those making infrastructures and products, potentially you can get a line of credit. Equipment financing. So that's another way to stretch your company without giving away the companies. So in the end of the day, it's about how to manage your cash, how to manage your equities. Many sources of these financings allow you to extend your run rate and make sure that using that to increase your equity values. And the extra 6 months, 9 months stretch, the cash flow can potentially make the next round, whether it's an up round or down round. So switch gear a little bit. I think we are sitting at a very exciting time. There's all sorts of these financings available, and obviously take any source of financing, take perseverance to get capital. Now, fortunately, one of the things that we see here is that we're in the junction. There's interest in the digital health, especially mobile health, is all-time high. I think this is a beautiful info chart, just captured everything thanks to our colleague here in West Wireless. One of the areas that I think many of you are familiar with these charts, that we are at the maximum level of capital expenditure and health, $8,000 per capita. That's pretty much tapped out. The other problem is aging population. As you know, unfortunately, older people do consume a significant, big portion of healthcare expenditures. And today we have about 12% of people are 65 and above. I think many people, 10,000 people that turn 65 and above every year. And obviously, it's not sustainable as a business as usual. As a result, more and more people realize that the technology, especially using mobile technology, can help. So what we see is, I think this wave is clearly coming, that last year, if you look at the wireless health, which I'm looking at a subset of the digital health, by my counts, about 15 deals, about $240 million invested last year. And this year, not even half year mark, I think we already at about 15 deals and $200 million invested. So my prediction is this year we're going to see easily double amount of deals and probably 50% or 60% growth in the total capital committed into this. I'm not counting all the seed and the incubator programs. If you add that together, that'll be significantly more. The other thing that we see is this is 2012. Actually, sometime we feel this is really the day one. Like everything else, take a little bit longer. And in wireless health and digital health, we're starting to feel that the scalability are finally reached. So Don actually mentioned earlier that Walgreens has millions and millions in downloads. But aside from Walgreens, the prescription app, there are many other companies has achieved that kind of a level of scalability. Azumio, for example, a company, when I met them was 3 people that had a couple million downloads. And today they have over 20 million downloads of multiple applications, WebMDs and Noon. We can talk about these lists continue to grow. So the adoptions are certainly starting to sink into society. The other thing is we see more and more collaborations between two camps of different VCs. we've seen traditionally the biotech and metal tech investors realize the difficulties that miracle drug is not going to cure everything, given that 30% of people don't even fill up prescriptions, and they realize everybody is carrying a cell phone, and more people are using mobile technology and digital technology demonstrated efficacies improving health. So we see more and more the traditional-minded MDs and PhDs embracing digital health. And likewise, the information technology company realized at this point that social media is cute, but in many cases that when Facebook goes public, they realize this is probably a time to plateau. And there's many things that I mentioned earlier. The time set couldn't be better. The technology is there. The needs it's urging the society to take a look at it. And so we've seen more and more biotech and information technology ventures gathering together, co-investing in those companies. And obviously, in Qualcomm Venture, couldn't be a better example. We are a technology company, and guess what? We have a life sciences fund. So we are actively involved in this area. And I think the ecosystem, it just covers just all gamut of things. And these are just my personal views, what happened in the digital health that just covers everything from wellness to fitness, unregulated side to chronic disease management, diabetes, CHF, certainly a big area of interest, and care in place. So that encompasses the 30-day readmission, the transitional care. The other thing is aging in place. We obviously have a company independent here to showcase that. I mentioned this is a big problem, and as more and more people turn to 65, especially this generation of the boomers are very familiar with technology, the iPhone and iPad savvy. There's definitely an opportunity there. And the other thing we have seen is continue to see amazing disruptive technology. And I think many of you are familiar with AliveCore. Imagine how disruptive that is. Now, instead of have a 12-lead ECG, now you have a single-lead ECG. You can carry it with you all the time. And we're seeing more and more of these amazing technologies coming out every day that potentially can build on that platform technology into various applications I mentioned. And also, we're seeing more and more partners in the venture communities. We've seen the big names as the Sequoia, Kleiner Perkins. As you probably noticed, Vinod Khosla has been making a lots of wave lately. He's made 2 announcements this week alone in investing into the wireless health. And the corporate, besides us, we see colleagues, the Intels and the drug companies and many others are collaborating and participating in this ecosystem. So to summarize, I think the timing couldn't be better at this point. I think momentums are still, it's building. The ecosystem is set. There is tons of angels out there. There's incubators out there, and the collaboration between the IT and the medical needs couldn't be any stronger. So as an entrepreneur, I think this is the optimal time, but also be mindful this is going to be a marathon. I think we mentioned earlier that you cannot release a code on Thursday the 9th, that you have to be ready, time it, and leverage the best sources of funding and be ready, right? So, venture money is there, and we have demonstrated and showed that more and more money are coming here. But make sure that you prepare yourself and spend your money wisely. The key is network, right? Everybody come in to add another piece of information, make your case even stronger. Right. Thanks.
We have some time for a couple questions. Do you mind?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Yes. What kind of minimums does the Qualcomm Life Fund require generally?
Well, minimum investments or
minimum well, not for their investments, for their investors. In other words, to buy in, if that's the proper term, to the
Qualcomm Life Fund. Yeah. What is the minimum investment we're making?
Yes.
Yeah. So
let me just try one more.
Okay, sorry.
If I were a prospective investor, what would you look to me for as an investment?
Okay, well, that's a good question. So first of all, Qualcomm Life Fund is what we call a strategic investor, right? So when you're talking about strategic investor, we are looking at, we have to satisfy two criteria. One is the strategic intent, and secondly, the financial returns. So financial return is obviously pretty straightforward. We pretty much operate the same way as most of the ventures. We look at billions of market and X number of returns. When it comes to strategic, here in Qualcomm, I think it's, especially Qualcomm Life Fund, is pretty well documented. You can go to qualcommlife.com to look at it. Essentially, we are very much tied into our TUNET go-to-market strategy. So earlier I mentioned a number of verticals we're looking at it, aging in place, chronic care, transitional cares, wellness and fitness. So those are all the areas that tied very closely to our TUNET go-to-market strategy. So that's kind of the filter aside from the financial side. Does that answer your question?
The dollar amount of the investment is what I'm trying to ask. If it's a fund, would you look for $1 million from an investor, or is there a minimum from an investor, not for the investor?
Okay.
Oh, it's self-funded?
Yeah, so sorry, I didn't quite get there. Yeah, so the Qualcomm Life Fund is actually a balance sheet fund that it's the only source of financing is the Qualcomm Corporation. So we don't, at this moment, we don't take external investors. But there are, obviously, we can talk offline. There's many other funds that have a similar agenda. If you're interested, I'll be happy to link you to that. Sorry about that.
Yeah, well, sorry for taking too much time.
Okay. Because I was totally in a different mindset, sorry.
What is the answer to the other side of that question? Minimum investments you guys make?
Yeah, we typically, our bite size is $2 to $5 million. So there is no minimum per se, but we oftentimes do not commit more than $5 million the first check. But obviously we are, we do planning, right? We not only invest in the company first round, but we'll do a follow-on investment. So that over the lifetime could invest $10 million and $15 million into a company.
Yes, my company is now 2 years old. We've got a product that works great. We've got customers we're selling. We've got real revenue. We'll be cash flow positive next year. And we're thinking about going to the B round. What do you think of the pros and cons of working with a well-connected attorney versus going to an investment banker versus trying ourselves to go directly to VC? Is there some effective strategy in this chess game that you would suggest that we pursue?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. So obviously, thank you. Your company is in a great position that, obviously you manage your company well, that you're about to reach break even, and obviously you need more money to grow the company. That's a very, very good position to be. Now, so at your stage of the company, I would say my advice, with apology to investment bankers and financial advisors here, that I say stay away from that at this stage, because unless you go into an M&A later stage or IPO, the investors, the investment bankers provides a great value. Oftentimes we feel it's almost a negative connotation. Somebody actually was introduced by a financial advisor or investor, unless truly that your companies are at the later stage or the management are so occupied with the business that you don't really have the bandwidth to do that. Typically, the investor like to talking to the entrepreneurs directly, right? So why go through the second cycle? And if you can't, get people's attention, then your investment banker is not going to help you that much. So I would, again, I mentioned earlier, make sure that you choose the right list of people and then targeting these people.
Just a follow-on question, because one of the things the investment bankers, and we haven't signed with anybody, but they say, look, we're going to be able to get you more term sheets. We have more potential investors. We can play everybody against each other. We'll get you the highest valuation, the least amount of dilution. And if you don't go with us one-on-one, it's harder for you to do. It's like being your own real estate agent. It's hard to negotiate when somebody else is a professional, is the intermediary. Is there any validity to that statement?
I think that's your typical sales pitch, right? Everybody will tell you that. Again, as I said, I apology to the advisors, investment bankers. From my experience, typically find a warm introduction, right, through somebody network and make that direct introduction, and make sure your message is clear. And oftentimes, you'll get the 45 minutes an hour from a prospective investor, so you don't really have to go through that You may need somebody to help you out, just to organize, because after all, it's it can be very, very time consuming to raise capital, even a company at your stage.
Okay, we have time for one quick more.
Hi, Leo Gill from Sourcetone, a music wellness company. I'm just wondering if you're making pre-revenue investments.
So that's an interesting question. So historically, we are stage agnostic. So from a Qualcomm Live Fund perspective, I've said semi-publicly that we have made a number of investments, and so far our portfolio have 6 investments, and 5 of which is pre-revenue. So if you look at a balance of portfolio perspective, and also I alluded earlier on, the exit perspective are typically 7-8 years from the inception of the company. From a perspective of a portfolio balance, at least 2012 or near term, we are mostly focused on revenue generating company. But we're obviously not going to preclude anybody from engage us, and if you have a truly disruptive technology and idea, we'd like to take a look at it. So timing's up.
Amazing. Fantastic. Everyone, serious round of applause for that.
Thank you.